Okay, so on this one, we are going to focus on something I've been thinking about very recently. Something I didn't really expect to be true, but more, I keep realizing that this is what more than likely is gonna happen. And this episode is gonna be about um, about fascists as well. This website's gonna be about. In this website, we're gonna be talking a lot about fascists and fascism in general. And there's gonna be a lot of scary things you'll hear about that. But today I'm wanting to talk about something a little more scarier than that and a lot more real than that. And I'm also going to be talking about George Orwell's 1984 book. As if you haven't read 1984, you might gonna if you feel you have the mental strength to go and read that book, I suggest you do that before listening to this. But if not, that's fine. I'm sure most will get the gist of what I'm talking about in today's episode. Now, I did read this book in high school when I was 16 years old. And so I did read it back in high school when I was 16 years old. And my teacher was not too happy that I chose the book to use as a presentation for the project in class. The least I can say is the whole project was canceled and nobody even got to present their project in front of the class or got to post their poster in the hallway. So if you can imagine, when I did read the book, it wasn't pleasurable, at least for me back then, because I mainly compared it to the fact that the school system and the school apparatus didn't allow me to post not even a simple poster on the simple facts that I was wanting to talk about and connect to what I had just read. So that's just some background of what experience I had. The first experience I had with the book, or with George Orwell's 1984. Maybe some of you have had similar experiences. Yes, so not sure if anybody reads those kinds of books anymore, but I just wanted to look back at it. It reminds things I've been seeing lately, feeling lately. It really just brought me back to this book, and I had to read it again. And right now, I'm gonna go ahead and read a part in the book. This is around the time when O'Brien, a character in the book, is talking to Winston inside the Ministry of Love. So, here we go. Now this is O'Brien speaking. Here goes. The first thing for you to understand is that in this place there are no martyrdoms. You have read the religious persecutions of the past. In the Middle Ages there was the Inquisition. It was a failure. It set out to eradicate heresy and ended by perpetuating it. For every heretic it burned out at the stake, thousands of others rose up. Why was that? Because the Inquisition killed its enemies in the open and killed them while they were still unrepentant. In fact, it killed them because they were unrepentant. Men were dying because they would not abandon their true beliefs. Naturally, all the glory belonged to the victim, and all the shame to the inquisitor who burned him. Later, in the 20th century, there were the totalitarians, as they were called. There were the German Nazis and the Russian communists. The Russians persecuted heresy more cruelly than the Inquisition had done, and they imagined that they had learned from the mistakes of the past. They knew, at any rate, that one must not make martyrs. Before they exposed their victims to public trial, they deliberately set themselves to destroy their dignity. They wore them down by torture and solitude until they were despicable, cringing wretches, confessing whatever was put into their mouths, covering themselves with abuse, accusing and sheltering behind one another, whimpering for mercy. And yet after only a few years, the same thing had happened over again. The dead men had become martyrs, and their degradation was forgotten. Once again, why was it? In the first place, because the confessions that they had made were obviously extorted and untrue. They did not make mistakes of that kind. All the confessions that are uttered here are true. We make them true. And above all, we do not allow the dead to rise up against us. You must stop imagining that posterity will vindicate you, Winston. Posterity will never hear of you. You will be lifted clean out from the stream of history. We shall turn you into gas and pour you into the stratosphere. Nothing will remain of you, not a name in a register, not a memory in a living brain. You will be annihilated in the past as well as in the future. You will never have existed. Then why bother to torture me, thought Winston, with a momentary bitterness. O'Brien checked his step, as though Winston had uttered the thought aloud. His large, ugly face came nearer, with the eyes a little narrowed. "You're thinking," he said, "that since we intended to destroy you utterly, so that nothing that you say or do can make the smallest difference. In that case, why do we go to the trouble of interrogating you first? That is what you were thinking, was it not?" "Yes," said Winston. O'Brien smiled slightly. "You are a flaw in the pattern, Winston. You are a stain that must be wiped out. Did I not tell you just now that we are different from the prosecutors of the past? We are not content with negative obedience, nor even with the most abject submission. When finally you surrender to us, it must be of your own free will. We do not destroy the heretic because he resists us. So long as he resists us, we never destroy him. We convert him. We capture his inner mind. We reshape him. We burn all evil and all illusion out of him. We bring him over to our side, not in appearance, but genuinely, heart and soul. We make him one of ourselves before we kill him. It is intolerable to us that an erroneous thought should exist anywhere in the world, however secret and powerless it may be. Even in the instant of death, we cannot permit any deviation. In the old days, the heretic walked to the stake, still a heretic, proclaiming his heresy, exulting in it. Even the victim of the Russian purges could carry rebellion locked up in his skull as he walked down the passage, waiting for the bullet. But we make the brain perfect before we blow it out. The command of the old despotisms was "thou shalt not." The command of the totalitarians was "thou shalt." Our command is "thou art." No one whom we bring to this place ever stands out against us. Everyone is washed clean, even those 3 miserable traitors in whose innocence you once believed. Jones, Aronson, and Rutherford. In the end, we broke them down. I took part in their interrogation myself. I saw them gradually worn down, whimpering, groveling, weeping. In the end, it was not with pain or fear, only with penitence. By the time we had finished with them, they were only the shells of men. There was nothing left in them except sorrow for what they had done and love of Big Brother. It was touching to see how they loved him. They begged to be shot quickly so that they could die while their minds were still clean. His voice had grown almost dreamy. The exaltation, the lunatic enthusiasm, was still in his face. He is not pretending, thought Winston. He is not a hypocrite. He believes every word he says. What most oppressed him was the consciousness of his own intellectual inferiority. He watched the heavy yet graceful form strolling to and fro, in and out of the range of his vision. O'Brien was a being in all ways larger than himself. There was no idea that he had ever had or could have that O'Brien had not long ago known, examined, and rejected. His mind contained Winston's mind, but in that case, how could it be true that O'Brien was mad? It must be he, Winston, who was mad. O'Brien halted and looked down at him. His voice had grown stern again. "Do not imagine that you will save yourself, Winston. However completely you surrender to us, no one who has once gone astray is ever spared. And even if we chose to let you live out the natural term of your life, still you would never escape from us. What happens to you here is forever. Understand that in advance. We shall crush you down to the point from which there is no coming back. Things will happen to you from which you could not recover. If you lived 1,000 years, never again will you be capable of ordinary human feeling. Everything will be dead inside you. Never again will you be capable of love or friendship or joy, of living or laughter or curiosity or courage or integrity. You will be hollow. We shall squeeze you empty, and then we shall fill you with ourselves." So that is just a small part of 1984. And that's the part I wanted to focus on. These characters known as O'Brien, the character known as O'Brien, can be very relatable, which is what I suspect is the intention of the writing. Now, I will have to make my own assessment on this, because as much as believable as that may seem, and as believable it may seem that this is the logical term of things, I can't seem to throw out the feeling that I have that that isn't the ending to all of this. It is the ending to this world becoming a dystopian novel. To me, is just fantasy. It's not real. And some people will call me. Then some people are gonna ask me, "Well, why do you believe that?" I'll even make the criticism towards myself. My own criticism would be that this is how it's gonna go. The precursor to these fascists and these fascist underground are the same sane, intelligent people behind their whole operation. So for me, if I were to make the argument for 1984, it's that these progressives and these neo-fascists are the precursor to the 1984 reality. Why do I say that? Because if you think about it, think about ideas such as being talked about here in the book, like doublethink or newspeak, face crime, thought crime, Goldsteinism. You can see that in today's time right now. All being scapegoated by the fascists. To these smart, intelligent characters such as O'Brien are the intelligent beings who are behind the whole operation that these fascists believe they are gonna bring forth again to the world, as in a total purge of minorities and people and oppressed people, historically oppressed people, to the very intelligent beings behind those operations. It's nothing but a logical step towards the logical conclusion. And doing it under the guise of fascism, I believe, is very convenient for them, and they will more than likely use it for the foreseeable future. Following the logic of 1984, I believe that they have set up things like doublethink. If you look at today's television or today's famous people or influencers or what have you, you'll see that most of them used those very tactics. They use newspeak, they use double talk, they use doublethink, they stay away from thought crime, they filter everything they say. Even comedians do it. And don't even get me started on the new comedians. These new, more famous comedians that we have that has replaced all the old comedians, masquerading as real comedians. None of them have ever made me laugh. Very rarely do I actually get a genuine laugh from these supposedly very famous comedians. I got no idea how they made it into those positions. They're not funny. Clearly, comedy has been downgraded. It's no longer. You can no longer be a comedic genius anymore. That's over with. And you have to thank things like doublethink and newspeak Newspeak for that. So there you've already have installed the false truths or that get espoused every single day by influential people, supposed influential people. I guess another detail would be the same thing, the things in the media. If you listen to the media, or state-sponsored television, this is things like your regular cable news, free news, if you will, that is out there. If you take a look at the Democratic National Committee website or Twitter account, you'll find the recommendation to read 1984, and to keep you from falling for fake news or fake information. So and there's another sign that I will be posting on Twitter as well. Well, if you watch the cable news, you'll see that many things on the news are real. They are legitimate. Many videos you see about a war happening somewhere else. It's it's real. That's real. It's a real video. A lot of them are real. Not all of them, obviously. I wouldn't expect them to have everything real on there, but they don't have to fake it. They can mainly put the real thing, just give a certain level of information about the situation without compromising any intelligent beings running the whole show. So if you look at the news, you'll find that. So it can take you away. Cable news can really convince you in believing that it has your best interest at heart, when in reality it is the person, it is the thing that is against your best interest. And then and the alternative isn't any better, i.e. the progressives. Neither is any other legitimized news source these days. That's one sign. And another sign that you could use to claim that the reality of 1884 is also coming to existence is the fact that people in politics still use the right mantra, when in reality there is no right and there is no left. It's a myth. It doesn't really exist. People use it to describe certain people on a general basis. But in reality, to its core, there is no left. Left is a direction. Do you want to go left or do you want to go right? That's all it is. It's not really a political dimension. It's false. So, considering how much the newspeak happens with those words, with left-right politics, when there is no left and there is no right, the only thing those terms do is confuse more people. It's just a mass confusion. Confuse everybody so that one day they can coalesce around one version of newspeak. And progressives don't understand that. Obviously, but I don't want to focus too much on them. But that's what it seems. Nobody even knows where they're on in the political spectrum. You ask any normal person, though, are you on the left or are you on the right? most people will say, "What are you talking about?" In the end, the only people who will fail is more than likely gonna be these neo-fascists. They don't understand the mentality that has to go towards actually controlling a whole species on a planet. So, for somebody to tell me that somehow the totalitarians are gonna, succeed in all this, which we will be talking a lot about them, a lot about fascism and a lot about the scary things about them. I still don't believe that they have the capability of actually taking over the world. It just won't happen. And at the end of the day, the only people truly capable of actually bringing about 1984 are those behind the whole game and the whole gambit, if you will. Now I will talk about why I believe that's not going to happen. I do believe that the fascists will fail. But I also believe that these far more intelligent beings will also fail, as intelligent as they may be. Well, I say that because fascists also see things in left and right ideologies, and the only thing that they're capable of is being confused. They're confused, they act violently. That's very convenient for a fascist group to do. The only group that can actually bring these two confused masses together are way smarter people who advocate for uniformity of all human beings to eliminate discontent forever by allowing all but them to succeed, using their intelligence as a form of legitimacy. And any other human who reaches that intelligence will also receive legitimacy. Advocating for that type of world. Unification of all human beings, no discontent. The science that they try to use, is very fictional. They made it up. Just as much as George Orwell had to think long and hard to make this book. As much as I like the perspective offered by this book, I also understand that trying to destroy a whole language is only possible if people coalesce around one language. That I know will never happen. For people and for somebody to actually finally unify all human beings on planet Earth is also impossible. You can't have the people who don't speak English or speak a certain language that's set on by a privileged peoples for everyone. For everyone to use. You can't set a whole language for everyone to use. There are languages out there most people don't even understand. There are indigenous people who use languages that most people out there don't understand and don't want to understand. So how are you going to eliminate them? That's impossible. You would have a whole flaw in the whole logical conclusion. They're not planning on changing their language. In fact, they're trying to save it. Maybe even evolve it more so. And if you have any knowledge on the languages being used by these indigenous groups, you find that they're very fascinating and very, very meaningful. You just, to do something against that would be, again, another flaw in the whole logical conclusion. So that's why I believe it wouldn't work. And at the same time, in the dystopia, poetry would cease to exist. There would be no poetry. There, like O'Brien said, where you have no feelings, you're just a shell of a man, and there are no feelings. If there are no feelings, then there is no poetry. The only way that this dystopia could actually exist is in the way of a technocratic reality created by your own self, by people in privileged positions in Western culture. I'm not sure if any of you have heard of simulated realities, or a reality being simulated to curate what you want when you want it forever. That's the only way this can actually work. That's the only real way I can see it work. Maybe some of you have different ideas, and if you'd like to share, I'd love to hear it or read it. But from what I see, is the only way that this could work is if people are somehow put into computers, or given a chance to live out a life, and then put into a computer room where there's consciousness builds a reality for themselves, where they'll be sitting in for their foreseeable future, maybe forever, if the technology exists to maintain their bodies and their composition. So that's the only real science fiction I can see here that can actually work one day. That can only be through some type of computer simulated reality for every single person on the planet, or just those who want it. So that's how that would work. Now, if we see today's science as we do today in its most advanced ways, obviously, things like nuclear, microchips, hypnotism, and all the aberrations that come from that. And at the end of the day, I think we can all agree that science doesn't really agree with natural human life. I don't know if you watch a lot of TV or anything, but if you do that, if you watch enough for a long time, you tend to become insane. You start doing the same thing over again. You turn on the TV, you turn on whatever it is that you turn on, and you listen. And that's usually what ends up happening today. And all it is, every single time you turn on the TV or you turn on that show you like so much, you're accepting insanity. And the idea that we can all be happy if we just get rid of money and have everyone live in this new science that we all use, that we all love so much. Because obviously, who doesn't like Game of Thrones, right? Who doesn't like House of Cards? Who doesn't like Star Wars, right? So everyone usually ends up believing that let's just get rid of money, have everyone taken care of, everything automated, and everybody will be happy. But that will also never work, because humans will receive a big surprise, I believe, by the actual nature of the universe. This could be a virus, catastrophe, food shortage, no synthetic solutions, etc. The universe will always be much clever and much older than we are. To think that somehow we can actually play God is silly. And I think it all goes back to the same childish ideas that most modern society grows up in. You know, you see all these things, these animated things in the world, in the modern world, or in the modern Western world, that even when you close your eyes, you're dreaming about these things. You're dreaming about that freakish animated show you watched. That is accepting insanity. And I think that is itself the gist of what is happening. To somehow have all peoples accept insanity. And accept it by also believing that it's good for you. And I just don't find that reality to be anything real. It doesn't. Anybody who if that reality is to be true, then there is no real human being left. And that really is the only thing I can say. If people would like the 1984 dystopia, then you better be prepared for the nuance that the universe will bring. We are nothing, because in my eyes, we are nothing more than an experiment of the universe here on this small rock. And there's just something bigger out there, bigger than all of us, and you can't expect that a certain species that lives within that to create its own universe. The only thing I can expect is a huge bug in the system, a huge virus, a huge flaw, just a very big flaw. As much people as might not want to believe it, that is what it will be. No real art will exist any longer in that type of world. To dehumanize people completely is going to be a big battle.